Hello, we're in the Catalyst Swarm after town hall, talking about community calendars. Uh, we've, uh, I started off. We're doing a little. We started recording a little late, so I'm gonna do a real quick wrap up here. We started by introducing this vision that Kawe and I and some other people around Swarm have had towards um, being able to aggregate community calendars uh, from Google or um, Darlington mentioned Meetup and be able to put them all in one calendar that you could subscribe to, or even another tool outside of like using the Google suite to be able to have a calendar you could subscribe to. Maybe even the tool could have an output for an output calendar that you could embed in a personal website, etc. And therefore be able to more broadly share and equitably invite the broader community to pivotal meetings that determine the future of Catalyst and Cardano. So yeah, uh, Darlington said he has been envisioning and working on a similar tool in the Lido Nation suite. Uh, and CMOS has a hand. What are you thinking, man? Let's get back into the conversation after my wrap up.
So yeah, I think you're on point as far as um, what's the next useful thing to do for the community. Um, there's a lot of like different calendar websites, right? But um, the right thing to do would be to focus on like how easy is it to get people to accept it and start using it. I'm thinking people can use whatever event management system they feel like using so long as that platform has the ability to export events to Google Calendar, which is very common. Meetup has that, Zoom has that. So the agreed upon standard is a link that you would provide from your Google Calendar share settings. You'd set it to public, and you would then somehow provide that calendar link to a calendar website, like WordPress with some plugins is probably ideal. And if there was a way to perhaps even just use Zapier to connect these two concepts, you could have a situation where the blog creates a new web page every time a new calendar is added. And the page just describes the calendar, just taking directly from Google's description. And every time a new event is added to one of these connected calendars, it may be a little janky, but you could just do this with Zapier. You could add a new blog post for every new calendar event that gets added. And that could all happen automatically in a fairly reasonable way.
Okay. Yeah, that seems like
How
a go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
how is Swarm website? What's the tech stack for the Swarm website?
Uh,
Does anybody know?
Only WordPress, I think, and some
Okay.
manual editing. There hasn't been like any infrastructure for that.
So here's an idea on a very simple central repository. Uh, what if we did a super simple um script like an open source project in GitHub with GitHub Actions that just reads um the calendars um and then just JSON by month or by week, whatever makes sense, so the file doesn't get too big. And it just outputs it back to the same GitHub repo. And then tools like Swarm or Lido Nation can just pull that JSON file for display purposes on their website. But then with the GitHub Actions, I think they can be scheduled too. So this will make it so nobody have to like worried about hosting that or like worried about the data. It could be, I think you can just make the GitHub run once a week or once a day. I know there's limitations on the cost of running, but I think if it's an open source project, you get a pretty generous free tiers. So it
So
might
what
be
would be
something
in the
that's easy to
GitHub?
implement. It would be
The calendars?
it would be the master list of the calendars, and then the outputs like by week or by month JSON files of the events, and with a standard.
But I guess when you pull from Google API the event information, you get the JSON there, and you get the ECS file, and that could give you the JSON. So you will pull from Google, put it into GitHub, and then from GitHub you let basically asynchronously pull information to website.
Yeah, so someone who wants to implement it doesn't have to do any of the Google SDK or any of that stuff, or like worried about that. They would just get the JSON file that has an agreed upon structure.
If you don't use Google SDK, you mean then manually somebody is inserting data to GitHub?
No. I meant if Lido wants to show the events, we don't have to worry about supporting Google or Meetup.
Okay.
Any sort of, we'll just get the JSON.
So I think before I can come up with any more ideas, good or bad, I need a consensus from you guys on what the submission process would look like. Would it be completely open that literally anybody could add as many calendars as they like at any time? Would there be some sort of human resource to vet these calendars and manually add them, like a GitHub pull or something like along the lines of what Lido mentioned? If I understand what you guys actually want it to look like, maybe I could come up with better ideas. Particularly with how they get onto the system.
I mean, the nice thing with having it being Git-based, people can build tools on top of it, and it's super easy to get started with the Git-based thing. If it was a pull request that someone needs to, like the way the Cardano token registry works, where you do a pull request, and then automation takes over. And then if Swarm wanted to, or another community wanted to, they could build a submission interface in front of that, to automate that pull request part. But the pull request it will be a Git-based approach will limit the dependencies, remove the need for one entity to be responsible and like manage and like pay for services and stuff like that. And it would make the actual project just a little simple.
So we're now discussing like the terms by which calendars would get added to the system, right? And I think a pull request would be a pretty cool way. It maybe just a Google form submission would work as well, but there would have to be some sort of.
And that is something you can automate, Google Form to Zapier or something. I don't know if that's even a thing, maybe.
Yeah, but then you come back to the SDK stuff. But that's good point, Simos. I think in terms of this project,
really depends on how you want it to be structured. That would then determine the confines of possibilities moving forward. I see the Swarm website is built on WordPress. It's just really another tactic, an alternative tactic to through like a Zapier integration, or however, anybody can can add calendars to the blog willy-nilly, but perhaps that WordPress has a plugin that allows logged in users to vote up or down on either a blog post or a page, which could allow the community to kind of share some of the manual labor and vetting the quality of these submissions.
Yeah, I think we should try to avoid specific tech stack to have the maximum interoperability, right? Like some people like Nest.js, some people like Laravel, WordPress. So the simpler we can keep it to just either an API or something, which means someone has to manage that, or what Lucio does with the Catalyst data, on the JSON files, and you go do what you want to do with it. You know.
Yeah, so I think this way, the starting point, I think what Darlington is also kind of implying is that the owners of this code, because it's going to be open source, and the vetting will be more like manual. So we put out the standard, and we then Swarm and Light Donation and everybody who's part of the development are the gatekeepers of who are able to audit whatever goes in. And when it starts scaling and pulling attraction, then I guess we have to put the code of conduct that we will move to more decentralized solutions if there is going to be a need for that. But I think rebuilding that may take actually like a lot of effort to create the proposal, or hopefully we could like maybe to budget it, like we make multiple proposals to cover that extra features.
There's pros and cons to both. Like, it's good that the GitHub strategy is platform agnostic, and I would probably want to try to code a script that fetches that. That sounds pretty cool. But then one con is that it puts the onus of integration on the website builder. And maybe Catalyst Swarm, maybe they do, maybe they don't. Or maybe other people do or don't have the technical ability to fetch and apply that data to their website. You guys would need some sort of WordPress integration for this.
Right. Well, I mean, back to what you were saying, CMOS, right? All that stack you was describing can sit on top of the GitHub, right? So someone can still then go pull that in and do what Peter is ultimately wanting the user experience to be. Swarm can pull that in, mirror it to the Swarm WordPress database as some custom post type or something. Because I think that there is a plugin. I haven't done WordPress in a while, like 9 years while. But I think there's a plugin that lets you give it a URL to a JSON file, and it will create a custom post type for you, or something like that. I'm just and I think you can even map it to post type that exists in your system already. So you can imagine you have an event calendar post type. You have this other plugin that can take in the JSON and create the post type the event calendar once. And then out of that, you can still generate your embedded calendar views for communities, right?
Perhaps
So
if
you
this
can
GitHub,
still
like,
have all of that.
perhaps if this GitHub, like, for every calendar had like a dedicated folder with its JSON in it and maybe a README, then websites like Catalyst Swarm can, I guess, go shopping for calendars they want to add to their own website and use that mechanism that you described, or something similar, to fetch and automatically make posts manually one by one.
Yeah. The structure is, we can do whatever we want, right? It could be based off of
Yeah, I guess that could be also coming back to the pull request you mentioned, because they need what you mentioned is like the what you also asked at the beginning, but we didn't touch on it. How do we onboard new users? And if we onboard them with this standard that provide calendar and that metadata kind of, which also then puts us perhaps like two things I want to mention. One thing what could help is the next feature that would be probably a killer thing is that you can through this whatever tooling we create, we generate new Google accounts basically with no new Google public calendars, where because it's then they can use the existing knowledge of I know how to get shared Google Calendar, I know how to get the CSCs on my Outlook and whatever current tools people are using, and so they have this Web2 solution which is currently being used, still available, but then we have like this GitHub and open source stuff too. But I think what is also important for the proposal itself is that if we bring or connect that into the blockchain too, so perhaps creating like some kind of graphical metadata on chain about this, so people can actually pull directly from on chain this information. This will create us like transaction fees. Somebody does. I put my calendar up, and I'm also okay to put it on chain. And this has like a cost associated. Probably it will be operational. We can include it in budget that we just put $500 aside to basically pay for everybody's calendars to be added on chain. That kind of creates this first opportunity that we move to blockchain-based pulling instead of GitHub.
Yeah, putting it on chain sort of remove some of the gatekeeping stuff, right? Because then we can just pull it off of there. That is very interesting to think about.
and that actually opens up the decentralization, because then every group themselves decides what kind of wallet addresses they allow to whitelist for calendars. But it can create a pretty messy.
My guess is that you're a developer.
Me? No.
Okay.
Or, well, I don't develop code.
Why do you say that, Seamus?
Well, we're discussing something that's like a three-dimensional puzzle. You know, you move one piece around and you have whole new considerations. So, you know, I suppose we just have to choose our priorities and who we want to use it and how easy we want to make it.
Well, I think it's two problems, right? I think who we want to use it, that becomes an abstraction thing, right? Like how easy we want to make it for everybody to use it becomes an abstraction. And so if we have a solid machine readable foundation, anybody can create an abstraction on top of how easy we want it to be for others to use it. And without that base machine readable layer, then we basically the alternative, if somebody now owns it, it's less accessible in some ways. It becomes either this is the Swarm way, you go here to this website and you do the thing, and then that's that. And Swarm is now the owner. So having this base layer that's a little technical doesn't prevent us from adding an abstraction on top of it. Right? You know, someone just got to go do a proposal to add that abstraction.
Right. And it sounds like the most forward-thinking way to go about it so far, but I'm still concerned about effective methods of quality control.
Right.
Yes.
So the quality control thing is the thing. And the other thing too, right? Writing and reading are two different things. If we do have it based off of, if we have metadata standards about what the calendar is, you know, who the author is and all that stuff, it could be in the repo and nobody could see it, right? Lido Nation, when Lido Nation pulls in those events, you better bet we're going to be filtering it for just shit we care about. We're not going to pull everything in automatically.
You could perhaps simply post an agreed upon metadata standard by which people can understand and easily mint their own calendar share NFTs, and then that could be, aggregated by anybody and sifted through. Perhaps if that standard has to have particular attributes, people can then, browse and filter at their leisure.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So the quality control really, a lot of it will come from, okay, what websites are displaying this calendar, and what are their requirements for showing my content? Like a Swarm, 1694.io is gonna show some of this stuff, and it's only gonna care about governance stuff. It's not gonna show any NFT things. It's not gonna show any random events. It's only gonna care about governance events, right? And
A metadata
so that
standard is
that in
probably even
itself,
easier for like a mid-level influencer to wrap their head around than even a GitHub pull.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think the standard creates a baseline for people to understand how the rest of the system operates, because you are what you measure. So if you define what you're measuring, then working
Right.
back off of that is fairly intuitive a lot of times. So wait, I want to do. Go ahead, Tivo, but I want to do a quick wrap and recenter on this conversation.
Yeah, I'm trying to touch the Cardano stuff briefly. I didn't really mention it to develop director because we already have a bunch of events created, and with the existing tooling, if we introduce Cardano-based scheduling, it's a totally new ballpark to even educate people to use, so that we get that enough like material to even represent. But what the idea was that this GitHub stuff I kind of like we pull our existing stuff, we put it in a GitHub, but we also have a standard. How do we put them in GitHub? How do we do the pull requests? And that same standard, we just duplicate in the Cardano blockchain. We just write out only, but we don't really use that much. The only purpose is basically to pay transaction fees and to make data that is actually pullable. But who is going to use it? We're going to play around it. Basically, yeah, we can do the play around with that. And if that is pulling like traction, then like a second proposal, Fund 11 would be that time when you become in, hey, calendar was successful. People are managing stuff. We are moving people over. We have a lot of watchers. Let's move now to decentralized, because GitHub is Swarm network, and developers building that are not able to audit all of that stuff. And this is like too centralized. We have shown and proven that this is working. Let's move to decentralized now. Here are standards how to do it on blockchain, because we now have experience, because we ourselves put them on blockchain every fucking time.
Yeah, I like that. And that give us a chance to iterate too, right? What works, what doesn't work before we get to the on-chain stuff.
Yeah.
How about this? Imagine a clone of Pool PM that focuses exclusively on tokens that match this metadata standard. So in addition to the search bar, such an interface could have more niche filters and browsing options that can take advantage of this metadata. If we have an extensive library of expected JSON key names, right? Either they're blank or they're not, but that would, just like if you're adding a product to Amazon, the more attributes you fill out, the more likely it's going to show up in search. And all it's doing is pulling up tokens that match your search filters. And when you click on one, the link to the calendar share link is right there in the metadata. People can add it to their calendars.
I like that as a future use case to aggregate the on-chain stuff that we create. Yeah.
What were
See.
you
I
wanting
mean,
to
does
do,
it have to
Peter?
be chain? We could also do it that we filter ourselves or label or let people do filter, get just a work group, filter this, organize it, and then we generate Google calendars for each of
Well,
these
yeah,
types.
you could add compound metrics and popularity metrics that are stored by the web server. Like maybe you have a pool, like if this is a pool PM clone, like I described, you can log in so that you can save favorites of certain items. You can star them or thumbs up them, and that would affect the sorting options, like sorting by newest or most popular.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely seems like one of the perfect follow-on proposal to this. I think that
Yeah.
there's two problems here, right? One is like data. We need to get data. We need to get like a database, right? So this is where the JSON stuff comes in. That's it. Let's figure the data piece is agnostic. Is some sort of structure that we can all agree to. And
Could
let's
you make
make that work.
Could you make a GitHub script just like you suggested? But could you make a script that queries the blockchain for the same information that this hypothetical pool clone would, so that you can fetch the information and do what you want with it in other ways rather than visiting the site?
Well, I mean, if it's on the blockchain, then that's that. So what I
You can,
really
I mean,
want
the
out of
GitHub page would
this,
provide like
uh,
it would be like a sync, but it would provide another way to query rather than query the blockchain.
but this is what I'm saying. That I think the part that I'm interested in is the event data, all the event data, machine readable, one place. That's the
Yes.
first milestone. Once we have that, we can have a conversation about what's next.
I thought
Let's
we were
just get
talking about
all
a
the event.
repository of calendars. Are we events?
Well, the point of calendar is to get the events, right? So
Yeah, so
yeah.
you take calendars and you abstract those calendars into events, and then you can
Okay.
re-aggregate them
Right.
into any
Yeah.
calendar in any
Exactly. So
format or on
you get all the events that's happening in the community in one place. That is a milestone. If we achieve that, that's great.
with a
People can have
metadata
all sorts
standard.
of crazy, right? People can have all sorts of crazy idea on how to present them, how to repackage them, you know. But let's just get all the events on all these disparate
I think
calendars in one place.
those two ideas. It feels like those two ideas would be stronger when combined than either by themselves. Like, what
Yeah,
if
but
you
I
have
don't care
another?
about any of it though, really. Like all I really want is the event. Yeah, I want to
That's
go
what I'm
one
talking
place
about.
and see all the events that's in Cardano.
Right.
The
This would be a
raw
way.
machine readable events. Like
Right. So this would be how you would do that. You'd have the metadata standard, so people put calendar share tokens on the blockchain, and then the
okay, I'll
GitHub
stop you there.
script.
If it's on the blockchain, I'm done. I don't care about anything else because I can just use TX pipe. As long as we have an event one place, that's all I want. Nothing else. If it's on the blockchain, I would just use TX pipe and get all that data into Postgres. I'm happy. If it's in the GitHub, I would just write a script to pull that GitHub. I'm happy. That's it.
I'm just saying, like, yeah, if you can query calendar share NFTs, then you can extrapolate all of the events that you want to sync.
So I think if we're keeping this simple of like let's just get milestone done. One is that are we gonna put it on chain first, and that's where it's going. That's where all the events will live. Or we're gonna put it off chain first, and that's where all the events will live. I just want to do what's the next first thing to do, like after
Honestly,
getting all these events.
putting it on chain just seems simpler all around. And
It is, but we don't get traction. At least we may, but that requires heavy onboarding
And
to use
much
because
heavier onboarding, yeah. Go ahead.
okay, fine. what if we also made an interface that, I mean, look, if you're hosting a calendar, you probably have some technical prowess, but you could make a minting service with an interface that only makes tokens in the
I would love for you to create that proposal and and we'll run it in parallel with this minimum viable event JSON
in order to
generation
make
standard.
it on-chain, we would need another proposal that is meant to onboard people, like going into a team, hey, where are your events, what you're doing? Let me help you and get your data on-chain, and just manually we are going and doing the operations, but like expecting the other groups and teams to do pull their already existing weekly meetings or whatever events they're preparing. They already want automated solutions, that they don't want to bother with that. And now somebody asks, hey, put it in this way on chain too, so that it's shared. And they will be just check this.
It's only one time they have to do it per calendar. No.
Yeah.
You could do it per event or per calendar. Be interesting.
Per calendar, and anybody else can remotely extrapolate any and all current events from that calendar share link.
So what's the next good step for this?
Well, let me do a little wrap up and then like synthesize what I feel like we've said so far as this product. So, well, there's this on-chain bit which I hadn't really considered. I thought that would be too heavy first iteration. So that wasn't what I was into originally, but that's an interesting evolution. But as far as where Kawe started was the GitHub with I don't know if he went as far as JSON outputs as simple, but as simple as that, but being able to take in either single events from a Google Calendar or Meetup or a whole calendar from either of those places and create a metadata standard that then those events can be queried for by the community that submitted them or by preset tags that we create, like if they're governance related versus not, so you can query based off of those things. And then on top of that, I think that could be one proposal in and of itself just to get to there, and that would be a good one. But I think included in that proposal, as far as for the UI user interface that I had it envisioned, it would be cool to be able to have some integrations that ship with that product that can be plugged into WordPress, Squarespace, or what other popular options for web hosting services like that.
I think we're getting warmer. Probably what Darlington's very first suggestion makes the most sense. It seems like even if we have a clear picture of what we'd like it to be in the future, realistically, it's probably going to have to take multiple forms over time. And the thing we can take action on immediately would be to make a GitHub repo by which a very uniform directory of calendar share links is made with manually vetted pull requests. And then at some point in the future, that GitHub will switch from taking pull requests to adding onto it to automatically syncing with some sort of blockchain querying solution once the NFT metadata standard is established.
That sounded pretty coherent to me, for sure. As far as a solid next step, anyone else have something to add to what Abe said?
Yeah, I think auditing the GitHub actions would be doing a feasibility audit. I know we're trying to go to GitHub, because we have a large Cardano community on there. But I know Gimbal Labs uses GitLab, and they also have automation as but I think, yeah, during the feasibility study of if this is even easy to do and all free, that's the other thing here. I'm hoping this is free.
Mm-hmm.
uh so that none of the organization have to go, you know obviously it's not free to develop it, but at
Right.
least
And
free
it
to run
wouldn't,
it, right? Once, right? Yeah.
well, yeah, run it on the on GitHub. Hopefully it's free,
Right.
but
Right.
anybody that's managing the gatekeeping, that's not going to be free.
Right. Right.
Well,
Yeah.
how many communities are there really that have event calendars in all of Cardano? Like 50. I think
I would
manually
say
managing the GitHub.
thousands.
All right. Well, I think manually managing the GitHub would be perfectly fine, especially if it's like understood that
It
this is an
has to be.
experimental testing phase and we have to have some calendars to get started.
Mm-hmm.
ChatGPT.
You
Look
know,
at your message, Tivo.
problem might be solved by simply stating that not all submissions will be accepted.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even just so. Wait. So what were you saying? What were we saying was a good next step? I feel like feasibility
You
study
Feasibility
started
is
GitHub
audit.
definitely.
repo. You started
Uh,
GitHub repo, Lido, and manually
uh,
start managing submissions.
Kawe
um.
has a GitHub repo already. Probably he started on. I don't know how far it is. Maybe he can tell us. But because as soon as Darlington started talking about GitHub and creating JSONs, he piped in and sent a link to his to the project, Swarm Press.
You have to check that out. What would be other good next steps though? Is the proposal writing or what?
Yeah, so feasibility, I got feasibility audit. Obviously, there's a proposal in here, and that would do a lot to make this concise and easy to understand, this effort. So
You
I
guys
got
let me hang out in your basement for free. I'll build it for you.
hell yeah. Anybody got a free basement?
And you can
Yeah,
stand there. It's very.
Yeah,
yeah, waiting for funding.
I got a crawl space,
Yeah.
but not a basement. Uh, let's see, proposal. So feasibility audit for costs and concerns, and then a proposal. Tivo, what are you thinking? Because you had more notes. You're more organized than me already.
In terms of what you mentioned, like feasibility,
Next
auditability.
steps, yeah.
Yeah, I think for feasibility, if you keep it small, but and just give the hints that we will be playing around with on chain and all that stuff, but that's like the last step, just to push data and only our like internal research, then we can kind of get it done, I guess. And we have like great developers who have proven that they can write the line of code.
Yeah.
For auditability, yeah, I wonder, is progress reports enough? We now have to do milestones, so I guess we need to set up like the steps of what we do. So the first one is like, yeah, like you mentioned, GitHub, then list of calendars. I guess the operation needs kind of a budgeting, because and that requires a standard of how do we request it.
The data.
Then probably would be nice to have like a monthly meeting, just an AMA or something where people can join and say that what they don't like about this or how to improve standards. and all the development ideas that are coming up. And so if they want to be connected, then we have a place for that.
Since the GitHub repo would have to be manually managed at the beginning anyway, we might or might not want to create a Google form that simplifies the submission of a new calendar ad request. Just, for the sake of getting a little bit more people on board if they don't like GitHub or don't know how to use it.
Yeah, and I think that could be included in the standard. So when you have a standard, you might as well make it easy and accessible, and form is like one of the objects. And then I think the hard part, which I have no clue about, is the integration. So when somebody is pushing you the Google Calendar, how do you get the JSON out of it? Or what is the procedure to put up the Google Calendar with the JSONs and that?
Well, I'll mention two methods, and I think the first one would be there's got to be multiple WordPress solutions, and one of us could make a short how-to video to really dumb it down, whereby so long as you have a JSON link of Google Calendar events, you can just paste it into a field somewhere, and WordPress will generate blog posts for you if you like. And then in my mind, the adult version of that would be some sort of GitHub automation that extrapolates that JSON. Let's say all of the JSON Google Calendar shared links that have been either manually added and or queried from the blockchain are then extrapolated into event level JSON that's added to the same folder in like a way that you can presume the URIs of the files.
I still was like at the step where I don't know how to get the JSON. I have a Google Calendar. How do I turn the Google Calendar into JSON? I think this step is missing, because you described aftermath. If you already have all of that, what developers will do and what are the like tech stack. And that is great. That would be the next step after kind of getting this onboarding stuff. Then what happens with that? And finally is outputs. And maybe we could also put like two auditability prompts that Darlington will have a feature of website as a proof that this is a milestone. And like the milestone needs to have on your website a calendar that shows a whitelisted stuff. And also another output would be then a Swarm press website will have it. And if those two are done, then we have also milestones completed. And then closing report, we would probably want to have like a retrospective, some kind of event after that, and put a bit of like effort into this closing report. Cost that too, and then we're cool. And maybe if we want to go push it a little, we also add a little bit budget to make a next proposal. And finance or.
I like this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
in my mind, it's like organized into folders. Like every calendar gets its own folder. That would include like a README, a JSON of the metadata standard that was queried, the Google Calendar share link, and a periodically updated event JSON.
So I think I really want to prove out the thing you said, Tivo. You have a Google Calendar. How do you go from Google Calendar to JSON? I really want to prove that out.
Yeah.
Feasibility audit.
The Google Calendar API, you can do that so long as the calendar is public. I'm pretty sure you can ping a Google Calendar API to get that.
Yeah.
I assume that's how you would do it.
It should. I would say that average time, I have no skills using ChatGPT. It's like 4 hours. So probably you would have even noticed the logic, I would say 1-2 hours to get that public. But now it gets trickier, yes, if it's private and you use your own token to get access from your own calendar list.
Yeah, we should probably just support public to start.
Yes, for sure.
But
Yeah.
one thing that we can do is not manual, just a guide. Well, you have a Google Calendar there, but what you have there, if you don't want to figure out how to do the automation, but manual version is that put time, put date, put event, and link to event, and that will be the JSON standard. And this is a format, and they can just manually script it out. Maybe we can even make a form that just makes this minimum JSON.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that we can copy paste to pull request.
If you if you focus on the event level, it gets harder to manage. And by making the system primarily about a Google shared link or other reference to get more information later, is that those events could be updated, deleted, or added upon.
Yeah, but people are gonna have one-off events though. We don't want to make them to go create a calendar just for one event. Or maybe they might not want to do that. But maybe that's something we add later.
The ability to have a
uh,
whole calendar be permanently updating versus just
No, as long
one
as
event at a
no,
time.
not that. Like just if I don't have a regular event, I just have one event that's coming up. Can I add it to this repository? You know?
Well, there needs to be some method by
Yeah.
which if you add recurring events or you allow people to have recurring events that you there's some period of time where they have to resubmit that recurring event or it'll drop off
No, I don't think
because
so. All you need is to make the calendar link available. If that was in GitHub, then GitHub scripts or whatever or other systems could query that GitHub repo just for the calendar link and extract all of the events, and it would be relatively up
and
to date.
it would be up to date according to them updating it. Yeah, you're right. The problem I was trying to speak to was that some people update their events, and then when we've copied them on the Swarm website, they're now out of date because they're from a couple months ago. And
No, I mean, this script would run every like 15 minutes or something.
No, but the idea is that he's manually adding that, and it's not controlled by any other script. You cannot. The person has to manually audit it. But I think it's fine. Like, I mean, it's not fine, but it pushes to the edge for us who whitelist events and do stuff to basically have. Okay, that actually includes this new thing. We have to have an operational body that deals with feedback, just like allocating time to have this, hey, I went to this event, but it didn't happen on your calendar, and like giving that easy access to report like faults or broken links that we could then turn off or get back to the organizer, hey, there are some changes, what happened, and then we can adjust it. And what happens is basically then we build the service, and we also then know how the demand, how good it will be. And we are based on that, we are able to now iterate into and understand what is the car tech stack when we build it on top of blockchain.
Jonathan, you're a developer. You want to help me? You want to help me? What did we say? Do a feasibility audit of
yeah,
taking a Google Calendar link, putting that into a repo, having GitHub Actions pick up those Google Calendar links, fetch all the events, and then output that events back as JSON objects into the same repo.
That's exactly what I'm suggesting. Like GitHub, some sort of I've never touched GitHub Actions, but this service would do all of the extrapolation on behalf of the WordPress websites and so forth that want to connect to it.
What do you think, Jonathan? Does
So
that seem feasible? Do you want to explore that with me?
sounds Sounds, yeah, very straightforward. I don't know what you're signing me up for. Thanks. It would just be basically looking at the ICS, which is a, you know, it's a markup language in itself, mapping it to JSON, and then spitting it into repos and wherever else we wants it. Sounds
Yeah,
dead easy.
right. Yeah.
I didn't even
Yeah,
know
we'll do all
ICS
of
is a
we'll do all
markup
of
style.
this.
I guess you don't even have to
Right,
use
it is.
API to
Yeah.
render it.
Well, oh yeah, yeah. If you, oh, there you go. So instead of a link, you could get the ICS file instead. But yeah, we should explore that, and then all of this will run in GitHub. So like, if you check 2 weeks, you check out the repo, you will see new commits that has new events based off of that master list of ICS files or URLs. You know.
And what's the desire? What's the reason for it going into GitHub?
Oh, so we can have a central database of all, not all, but like ideally all the Cardano events that can then be pulled by the Swarm or Lido Nation. I want to show events that's happening in Cardano or just special events they care about for people to then be able to
Yeah.
find stuff that's happening in Cardano, basically.
So essentially, yeah, after you have this central repo of all the events, other integrations can be made for the display of those events inside a WordPress website or inside another web
Right.
host.
Nest.js or whatever. And it's on GitHub because then we don't have to have an entity host an API, like manage a database and all that stuff. And it would just be Git based.
Okay, yeah. And also
It'll
you've got
be-
versioning then as well.
It'll be
Right.
important to it'll be important to prevent people from adding calendars because canceling people is very important to us here in Cardano.
We need to deplatform you right now.
Right now.
Well, and obviously
Copy-paste.
adding calendar is one thing. If you're just adding calendar to spam the system, maybe. But the fact that you add a calendar, does that mean people are going to see the events that's
yeah.
on there, right?
People should be able
Right,
to subscribe to whatever events or class of events that they want, regardless of. It's just they're all in one
Yeah.
place. You should be able to select
Yeah,
the
who
ones you
gets
want
to
to
see
display.
it depends on people like Swan or Lido who are going to be displaying those calendars. So there will be gatekeeping.
That would open up
Yeah.
the opportunity for a whole host of competitor websites that are trying to make the best use of this repo.
Yep. Just the Catalyst.
shopping experience of sorts. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we are 1 minute
like
away.
Wallets,
We're 1 minute away from an hour long on this recording. So I would like to wrap it up so we don't go over an hour. This has been awesome. We're gonna do a feasibility study over this week, and I will host another after town hall breakout on the same topic next week. So hope to.
I don't know about this week, but where is the good async place for this conversation?
You can close the recording and we can keep rambling.
Yeah, we're closing the recording. It's been awesome. We're gonna find some next actions to nail down on together. Thank you. Peace.